because I feel like, you have to be a great storyteller to be a great history teller too. You can look up facts, you can look up figures, you can look up dates and stuff, but telling the kind of the story behind the story and making things come alive.
Kelly here, your host of Word First 931, and I am so excited. This is the annual Dogwood Walking Tour with Mr. Jimmy Haley, and this is History with Haley segment. And tell everybody a little bit what we're about to do.
Well, it is a historic cemetery. It's known as Riverside or the New City Cemetery. So it's been here since 1878. Okay. And so if you see bodies here before 1878, they were moved here from other locations. But we'll be looking at the first burial that was here. But it's a beautiful time of the year. There's dogwoods in bloom. And so these dogwoods have been here for almost 100 years. Wow. And some of them are kind of reaching the end of their lifespan. We're replacing them slowly. So if people want to do a donation to the city and plant a dogwood in somebody's memory, we'd be welcome to have them. So as a replacement. So we'll be focusing a little bit on the Civil War and just to reconnect with that earlier segment that we've done together and talk a little bit about the stories and some of the important things that took place here in McMinnville during the Civil War and right afterwards, including the murder of the town marshal.
Oh, wow. Well, here we go. So let's enjoy this nice walking tour.
Welcome to Riverside Cemetery. Sometimes it's known as the New City Cemetery because it replaced the old city cemetery that's up on High Street. And so this was started in 1878. And so if you see any bodies buried here before 1878 with a date on a tombstone, those were moved here by family members. Some from the old cemetery up on High Street because it had kind of fallen in a little disrepair and was not so fashionable. But when this cemetery was laid out in 1878, it was supposed to be a prim and proper cemetery. And so not haphazard. So it had streets and crosswalks and alleys in between sections of the grave so that hearses and service vehicles could get in and out for digging graves or whatever. And so this was known as Main Street. And so this along the wall here was known as Confederate Road because prior to the cemetery being established in 1878, there was a reunion here of Confederate and Union soldiers. And so they met on the grounds, they had speeches, and so the Confederates, some of them in their old uniforms and carrying their old guns, lined up along this and marched up to the hill for the services and for the speeches. And so this Main Street is sometimes also referred to as King's Row. That's what I always knew it as a child, was King's Row, because some of the fanciest and richest people in McMinnville in Warren County are buried along this way. And many of them lived in great old big fine houses along West Main Street that most of them have been bulldozed down and destroyed for progress. But many of them lived in big houses, had beautiful lawns, and so people would oftentimes stroll up and down Main Street looking at the beautiful houses and telling stories, and the gardens that the ladies competed to have all these beautiful flowers and horticultural features that and fountains and statues in their gardens. And so people would actually come down here, just like we're doing today, on beautiful spring days or in the fall, and take strolls and talk about the people and talk about the tombstones, because some of them are very elaborate along this road as well. And so there's a crossroads up here, and then there's the main section that's oftentimes where the most prominent people are sometimes, and it has its own special gate, is up on the hill. And so it has a side entrance over here. This cemetery used to be surrounded by this wrought iron fence, but it's since been removed, and we just have one section down through here now, and it's not in the best shape at all. So when they removed the wrought iron fencing many people took them home and put them in their yards. So if you see anything that looks like this in people's yards around McMinnville or Warren County, it probably originated from the cemetery in some way. And several of the old graves also had wrought iron fences around them, special fences. There's a few of those still left, but a lot of those were removed because they weren't as fashionable and they weren't good taste after a while. They looked a little old-fashioned, so people wanted modern-looking monuments after a while, something that didn't reflect the past. So it is a historic cemetery, so this is the depot. And so when the train came in the 1850s to Warren County, it changed lives forever, because you could get, fresh oysters from the Gulf. You could get fine French furniture from, that came into the port of New Orleans and be shipped up river and put on train and come to McMinnville. You could travel almost anywhere, because before the Civil War, to have a railroad, and this was the railroad spur, it was a big deal to bring it here. And it changed us forever. It brought a lot of wealth to people as well, because you could ship out things. So the nursery industry, right next door was, the Boyds had a nursery here, and that's where the dogwood trees came from as well. So originally there was hedges all the way down through here. And so a lot of them died, and they got full of yellow jackets and all kinds of other stuff, and were looking a little scraggly. So they decided to remove all of those and plant some of the dogwood trees that the Boyds had propagated. And so some of those are almost 100 years old now. So they're kind of getting toward the end of their life, and there's several of them that are dead. The biggest trees in the cemetery, the big sugar maples that you'll see, most of them were planted in the 1870s as well, 1878, 79, 80, because there was a big revival to plant sugar maple trees everywhere. And so we had them all down Chancery Street, all around the courthouse. But most of these are starting to end their lives as well. So the big stump right here, you'll see a lot of trees that have been cut. So the boxwoods and several of the holly trees are original as well. So what we're going to be talking a little bit about today is about some of the stories of the people. We'll have a little Civil War theme of sorts as well, because the railroad brought the Civil War to the front door of McMinnville. We had factories here shipping out textiles. We had companies here that were specializing in apple brandy, shipping out brandy by the barrels as well. There was a lot of timber and lumber industry growing right before the Civil War, so it could be loaded up here and transported anywhere. And so it became pivotal for both armies, the Union and the Confederate armies, to control McMinnville. It was a supply line. And so, we didn't have a lot of great big plantations. We did have a fairly good sized enslaved population, of course, that were freed after the war. We had several freed black people, families that lived here as well, that were very well respected. So we were kind of a little cosmopolitan town with the help of the railroad. And so it was a city of brick homes and fine houses and brick sidewalks and lots of stores. And so we could get almost anything when the railroad came in. And so it was kind of a curse during the war, but it was a blessing before the war, and then afterwards when the railroads were rebuilt and transportation came back to Warren County again. But the depot was burned several times during the Civil War. We don't have the old depot building anymore. It was torn down when I was younger, but it sat very close to where the Caney Fork and Western Railroad, the Tri-County Railroad office is today. So we're going to be walking down Main Street, talking about some stories and some people, and like I said, with a little Civil War twisted as well. Be careful walking around in the cemetery. There are some holes, and it's easy to trip over some of these curbstones that surround them, and some of the tombstones that have been knocked down or laying on the ground. So just be careful where you walk, and we'll stroll down Main Street and cross over into the cemetery a little bit, and then wind back around the main hill, where we'll talk about Colonel Savage just a little bit. We'll start with lot number 1. And so these all are numbered. And these lots were sold and deeds were recorded. So I had the deed book that showed how much people gave for lots, and some of the prime lots, like this one, sold as much as $30 or $40, but in the 1870s, that was a whole lot of money. That was a month's wages for a whole lot of people, so not everybody could afford. And of course, the richer people and the more well-to-do people, they wanted to snap up the prime real estate, so to speak. And so this lot number 1 was one of the key ones to be coming right through the lot. And this is the Walling lot. And so you'll see those kind of teepee, people when I was a kid called those teepees and stuff, but they're slab graves, and it was to keep animals from digging into the graves. They oftentimes fell in, and groundhogs would make little nests down in the ground with them. And so those were moved here from Walling, Tennessee, where Mr. Walling's family, some of them had lived. So those were moved here. But let me talk a little bit about Mr. Jesse Walling. And so he's one of my heroes from history, so to speak. He's one of my favorites. He could be a little bit of a curmudgeon and a little bit heavy-hearted at times, and a little hard to budge on some decisions. But he grew up here in Warren County before the Civil War, went to Burritt College. His father was a judge, and so he had a fairly privileged life. And when the Civil War broke out, and he wanted to be a part of it, as a lot of young men did, he joined up with the 16th Tennessee, served under Colonel Savage, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and fought in several battles. And he was a little guy. He was like me. He was about my size. And he was a little cantankerous at times, and very well-spirited, let's just say. He gave his opinion quite frequently. At the Battle of Murfreesboro, he was wounded very badly, and he thought he was going to die. As they were marching across the field, the 16th Tennessee had a heavy toll taken, and Colonel Savage blamed a lack of support and a lack of munitions, and was not very happy, Colonel Savage wasn't, with the way that his troops were oftentimes treated and shortchanged. He thought it was a political deal because he didn't like Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy, because they'd served in Congress together. But Jesse Walling served in the 16th Tennessee. He had a buddy who was quite large, pretty good sized guy. He was over 6 foot tall and big boned and you know, muscular and heavy. And but they were buddies. And so they were side by side. So many times during the war, you had a buddy that you kept by your side, so in case someone died or someone got wounded, the other one would take care of them, or make sure the body got taken care of, unless, of course, both of them were killed. Well, at the Battle of Murfreesboro, Jesse was shot clear through his stomach with, you know, a bullet. And it went in the front and went out the back, and he fell to his knees. He had made a pact with his buddy, Mr. Riley Nunley, that if anything happens to me, Riley, you make sure I get to the sidelines. You make sure that my body is identified. Don't leave me in this field to die. And so as they were marching across and shooting guns, and there was smoke everywhere, the Battle of Murfreesboro was fairly deadly to the Confederacy, and particularly the 16th Tennessee. And so the battle was so loud, believe it or not, you could hear the battle in McMinnville. That's how much the cannons, and you could actually, and it was loud. A lot of people knew, it was New Year's, a lot of the people in McMinnville knew that their sons were there, and so it was right after Christmas, and they had not seen their children, and many of them took wagons of what supplies they could to Murfreesboro in hopes of, you know, having a chance to see their child, their son, and to give them some blankets or give them some extra clothes or whatever they needed, and to visit a little bit. But that's not the way it was. Many took wagons down. Instead of, you know, giving them to their sons, they brought bodies back. Jesse Walling had to be brought back as well, but he survived. When Riley saw Jesse go down to his knees and drop his gun, Riley threw his gun down and rushed to Jesse's side and cradled him and says, "What do you want me to do?" And Jesse said, "Get me to the sidelines, get me to the sidelines." And he said, "But I'm shot." And so Jesse had a silk handkerchief that his mother had given him, and so they actually like dental flossed the wound from front to back and left the handkerchief there. Believe it or not, it didn't pierce any organs. It didn't kill him. He survived. His father came and got him, brought him back to McMinnville, nursed him back to health. But Jesse was determined at that point. He believed that God had spared him for a reason, that providence had played its course, that he should have died on that battlefield, but he did not. He survived. And he said, God's got a plan for me. And so he became very religious. He never drank, he never smoked, he never swore. He belonged to Central Church of Christ. I taught Sunday school. He came back to McMinnville, married, Now Miss Bell, his wife, now she was a crusty lady of sorts. I have her diary, and she bemoans being married to Jesse because he was bigger than life. She bemoaned her children because they didn't come and see her enough. And poor Belle sitting at home, lonely, and no one comes to see her. And it was like, you know, a Debbie Downer kind of person. So she was not the happiest person in the world. But Jesse, after the war, became a prominent businessman. One of the first things that Warren County needed to do was reestablish banking in order to get back on our feet again. And so Jesse Walling helped to recruit Mr. Magnus, and we'll look at the Magnuses up on the hill as well, to come here and invest. They were from Smithville. They were Unionists during the war. They'd sent their money elsewhere to be safe and not to be exploited by the Confederate cause. But they recruited Mr. Magnus. Mr. Walling got involved in the creation of what became the National Bank of McMinnville, but it's now First National Bank that's celebrating this now. You know, 1874 is when it was created, 100 years and 50 years with banking. And so Jesse was a big part of that, a big stockholder, but he also started City Bank and Trust. He also bought the People's Bank and merged it with City Bank and Trust. And so he was very instrumental in banking. He also started Walling Power and Light. So he big believer in electricity and the future of electricity, and fought to get electricity downtown McMinnville into the county. And so Walling Power and Light became a phenomenon for a small little rural community to have power and electric lights. He believed in electricity so much he even bought himself an electric car, the first electric car in McMinnville. And so that was like in 1915. And so he had little Alex that he tooked around again, and behind his bank building, he had a charging station. And so he would charge his car every day. It's where Paul Holder's, where my son-in-law's real estate office is. And that charging station was still there when I was a little kid in that old warehouse that sat behind that's since been torn down. But Jesse was a mover and groover. And so a lot of what he did for the betterment of the community. He also was mayor. And so when he was mayor, one of the big things he did, he wanted to beautify downtown. And so he wanted to put fresh concrete sidewalks and redo the park downtown. And so it had kind of fallen into disrepair, and dead trees and hogs had run loose in town and rooted in the court square. And so he approached the alderman, and he said, you know, heck guys, if you're not going to do it, I'll pay for it myself. And so he paid for the downtown beautification thing. So, you know, when I was mayor and we did the beautification stuff, that kind of inspired me that when we did the streetscape program and everything else, I said, we're doing it for you, Jesse Walling, so in your memory. So you can see he lived quite a long life. He's got religious quotes from the Bible on there as well. But in lot number 1, he and his family are all buried here on up through the next little block as well with some of the family members. So Jesse Walling, like I said, had it not been for him, Warren County would probably not be on the financial standing that it is. We would not have some of the economic development because he was instrumental in making sure that businesses had the assets and made the loans to small businesses. He made sure that happened. And so First National kind of had the reputation of, you know, and he sold all his stock and created another bank in competition. And so his 2 sons, Edgar and Clarence, ended up running City Bank and Trust until their death as well. So when I was a kid, you're going to see lots of symbolism on these tombstones. Oftentimes you see an urn and a drape over it. Sometimes you'll see a lamb or a dove, which usually means a child. And so you see all kinds of laurel wreaths and stuff, sometimes turned upside down to signify death. So a lot of these are somewhat unique. You'll sometimes see handshakes and stuff, so you're meeting your Lord and your Maker. So you'll see Masonic symbols, you'll see Oddfellow symbols as well on some of the tombstones. And then you'll see some really odd tombstones as well, because McMinnville had quite a few master stonemasons here that made beautiful tombstones, and they took very much pride in making something unique or special order. Now, you could order tombstones from Sears and Roebuck. You could order them, you know, by mail, and they would be delivered here at the depot, and you could go pick them up, and you know, it was, you know, it'd be like Walmart selling tombstones, which I'm surprised they don't do, and maybe they do. I know they sell caskets, I think, online, but you could actually buy tombstones through mail order and have them delivered. And so a lot of them are cookie cutter and they all look the same, but some of them are quite unique. And so they're beautiful. And so sometimes there's a great big ball sitting on top of some, and it's just to make something a little bit more unique, a little bit more special, so that people like us 100 years later is going to come by and say, look at that one. So yes.
You were talking about he drove around in an electric car.
Yes.
One of the first ones. Who made that electric car?
We're trying to figure out. It stayed in the Walling house for years until the house was sold. And I'd seen it, but I still don't know what happened to it. The son sold it. And so they loaded it up on a truck and they took it. So I've been looking for this car forever. I have a picture of it, but you can't tell what kind of car it is.
Yeah.
And so, there's several that look just alike. And so it's supposed to be in a museum somewhere, but I've never been able to find it. So if anybody wants to help me search for little Alex, I can get you a picture of it and we'll start looking. But I'm sure it's in a private collection or still in a museum somewhere. Before we cross over into the cemetery, I'll talk a little bit about Mr. Edward Mumford. And so during the Civil War, he served in a unit out of southern Kentucky in the Clarksville area. He was a quartermaster. And after the war, a lot of northern investors, sometimes they're called carpetbaggers, were coming to Tennessee to exploit resources, particularly coal and iron and lumber. And so natural gas to a little bit extent as well, but that was just the beginning of it. And so most of these northern investors, they needed a good southern gentleman who was an attorney to do work for them and would kind of cut the ice a little bit in making deals with landowners and property owners. And so Colonel Mumford came to McMinnville and ended up buying a big mansion that is today what we call the Blue Building, and it's under construction right now, right across from us. So the main core of that building that later became a school and city hall was the Mumford Mansion. And so it had beautiful gardens and statues, a sunken rose garden, a greenhouse. It was a mansion. When he bought it, it had not been completed. It had been started right after the Civil War by the Lewis family and the Pickett family, the Pickett family. And so the Picketts had been here a little while. They'd come here during the summer to go to Beersheba Springs, and summer there. They Louisiana plantation owners. And so he went broke building the house. It sat empty. When Mumford came, he wanted a grand house, and so he bought it and finished it. And on the third floor, he had this huge library and a ballroom where he could entertain. But Colonel Mumford became kind of the go-to guy. So for legal matters, but also in political matters. So he would hold political debates and meetings where he would discuss current politics or things the General Assembly or Washington was doing. And so he was kind of one of those people that knew a lot and liked to share it. And so a lot of aspiring politicians, a lot of people who, wanted to know exactly what to go on or how to vote on issues would oftentimes listen to some of Colonel Mumford's lectures and speeches, and oftentimes have private conversations with them if it was a matter of business of sorts. And so when he died, his wife wanted to be able to see his tombstone from her bedroom window. And so you can actually see this tombstone from the upstairs floor, corner bedroom where the Mumfords slept. So, when he died and his wife died, the property sat a little bit empty for a while, and then some of their family, the Lewis family, ended up living there. And when the city high school burned on College Street, the Mumford family, the Lewises, decided to offer it to the city as a replacement, and so that's when it became a school. They built the wings in the gymnasium, and it became the city high school for a while. And then when Central was built, that became the high school, and then the school became an elementary school, City Grammar School. and it was later a junior high. It's been several things, but the building's still there, and Colonel Mumford's still buried here, so he'll be here. It's one of the most prestigious of the tombstones as well. So this was specially made and carved just for their family. You'll see some similar, but nothing exactly like this one. So we're going to walk over to Enoch Cooksey's grave, unless you've got a question.
Is there any pictures of the house, or where is the house?
There's not any great pictures. There's some panoramas, which we're going to talk about a little bit, of the city in 1878 that does, and you can see the house and what it kind of looked like. We have searched and looked and everything for a picture of the house, and they just don't exist. So they may in the Hughes Brady archive, but nobody's been through all of those pictures, so we don't know. There are a lot of house pictures because I've seen them in there, but I've never seen that one. And it would stand out because it was a grand house. But Enoch Cooksey was one of those, and he was from a fairly decent family. The Cooksey name, like a lot of these names, have died out. So a lot of their families are gone. They didn't have children, or they moved on to other places. And so Enoch Cooksey, after the Civil War, became the town marshal. And so the town marshal was kind of like the chief of police. That's about an equivalent of what he did. So during the Civil War, there was a lot of sort of semi-illegal activity going on. A lot of bootlegging, prostitution for the soldiers that were here. It was a little sketchy. And after the Civil War, a lot of those bars continued to operate. There was a bar just on nearly every corner in downtown McMinnville, and there were several houses of ill repute down here in the depot as well that were frequented by lots of town folks, prominent people as well. So Cooksey's job was to make sure that the streets were safe, that drunks were arrested and put in jail to sober up. And so the jail was right up on the base of the hill going up Depot Hill on the left. And so Cooksey would go around, check the doors at nighttime, make sure everything was locked up. And so, but now Cooksey had a little bit of a drinking problem himself. A lot of soldiers came back from the war and had addictions, many of them alcohol. Morphine was over the counter. People got hooked on morphine because of pain and injuries during the war. And so it was not unheard of for people to be inebriated, even during the middle of the day. So, but Cooksey was one of those frequenters down the houses of ill repute, and he would hang out in the bars with the local boys and drink a beer or two or a shot of whiskey, and he was the town marshal. So he knew dirt on people, they knew dirt on him. And so one night in the dead of winter, he was called to the house of ill repute, right, not very far from where the cemetery is today, and that's before the cemetery was even established. And he was there was some kind of commotion down there, and he needed to go check it out. And so he started down the hill with his